What's up, everybody? It's HBT with the Straight Up Wrestling Show, guys. Here live, man, to talk about some things, man. Here to talk about the return to one-on-one wrestling, guys. The Square Circle's lost honor. You know, just basically talking about the Square Circle's lost honor, and I'm talking about one-on-one wrestling. Now, is there going to be a return to one-on-one wrestling? Now, it never left, but everybody who's been watching wrestling can see that we have multiple attacks every week, all the time, multiple attacks, matches not finishing. We don't get a conclusion to matches for the most part until we go into maybe a pay-per-view or PLE, in between the time that they setting things up, they having weekly shows into that premium live event or that pay-per-view, which those things are coming very fast now. There's usually attacks, wrestlers getting attacked or somebody coming in to help one of the wrestlers or whatever, or usually multiple people coming into that ring, attacking. Wrestling has always had attacks, everybody. It always have been that way, but not to the level that we have it today. The level that we have it today is outrageous, and it's ruining wrestling, in my opinion, in a lot of people's opinion. It's basically turning people off, and it will turn people off. People are turning the channel, and I think chaos is the number one reason that people is actually doing that. And, there's just no rules. There has to be rules and regulations to the way any business work, to the way this thing is done. There has to be rules and regulations of how you do it, and just pure constant chaos all the time of having somebody out there waiting to attack another wrestler, when these guys are supposed to be one-on-one or two-on-two. It does not look good. It doesn't make wrestling look good because you never have a definitive winner, and it's just sad, man. It really is sad. But what's going on, Lucas? I see you in the house. What's going on? I'm eating Microsoft popcorn. Okay. All right, Lucas says, howdy, folks. Lucas said, I'm eating Minecraft popcorn, and it's spicy. Okay. All right, Lucas said, rest in peace, Hulk Hogan. Yes, sir. 1993. Let's see, 1993, summer 2025. No. Wow, rest in peace, Hulk Hogan, 1953, summer 2025. Yes, those are the dates, buddy. Those are the dates. But I appreciate everybody coming in, and as you come in, go ahead and hit that like, share, join. If you're over on Facebook, if you're over on YouTube, you hit that like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, ding, 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 so you know we're on like times like these. And if you catch us over on Twitch, you do the same thing that you do on YouTube, and over on Twitter, X, guys, formerly known as Twitter, hit that like, share, tweet, and retweet, and follow the Straight Up Wrestling Show. And guys, I know I'm coming on Saturday. Coming here Saturday, a lot of people are out doing a lot of other different things. But hey, I decided to come on, do a little podcast. Hey, maybe I should have done a video, but I decided to do a podcast. Guys, do it live. But yes, guys, I'm talking about the Square Circle's lost honor, the return to one-on-one wrestling. And hey, I don't watch Ring of Honor. I don't. As far as AEW, you have to subscribe to that channel to watch it. And at the time, I really didn't want to do that because we was watching so much wrestling. We was covering so much wrestling. So I did not want to add that to our plate. What's up, Richard Hood? Richard Hood says, Harry, what's up? What's up, Richard Hood? Good to see you. But I definitely did not want to add that to our plate. But I know Ring of Honor, you have something like Ring of Honor where they used to shake hands before every match. It was an honor system as far as included in that. And that's what wrestling basically was about. It was an honor system. You did have the guys who would, what we called back in the day, we called cheaters. I mean, just straight up, it was cheaters. You had your good guys, you had your bad guys, and your bad guys would cheat a lot. I mean, they just did. That's what they did, and that's what we expected them to do. These guys would cheat a lot. Guys, give me just a second here. I want to share this thing. Let me go ahead and share this over here on my Facebook, and we'll get back to this. All right, give me just a second here. Do some sharing here. All right, guys. But yes, so it's not like people getting jumped, anything like that. That is something new. But within people wrestling one-on-one, when you let two combatants go, two titans go at it one-on-one, and somebody gets to leave as a definitive winner, guys. A guy that's won that match, and he gets to leave with honor. He gets to walk through, walk down the aisle or walk through the crowd as the person who's won that bout. He might contain his title or might win a title, or if there's no title involved, he gets to leave as the winner with his hand, after his hand is raised, with his head held high. He gets to leave like that. There's an honor in that, and people are, people in human history have been attracted to that. Now, even in street fights, guys, fights in the schoolyard, we wanted to see people, if there was a fight going on, we wanted to, in my generation, when I was growing up, in the generations before that, before us X's, before us Generation X guys, ladies and gentlemen, we used to see fights. There was one-on-one, and you knew the guys, you knew the people in school who could fight. And anytime that there was a big time fight that was coming up, everybody in school would try to get out to see that fight. Everybody. And it was one-on-one. And after the fight, there was honor in that. And the two combatants or whatever, they was pulled apart and they walk away and maybe come back the next day or a week or two later, they back best friends again, especially the guys. But there was an honor in that, even the same thing in street fighting. I used to walk down the street in certain neighborhoods when I was growing up, because my mom used to take us. I grew up, and when I was younger, I was in a tough neighborhood, and I used to go walking down the street, and older people, maybe older teenagers or older adults, young adults will be out strapping. Sometimes older adults, they be out strapping, they be out fighting. But you see them like a week or two later, and it was all cool, but it was hardcore fighting. It was one-on-one, and people will watch that. But anytime that there was a fight going on, you heard about a fight in school going on, and there was a fight, and it attract people. And then I'm getting a little ahead of myself. When I got into like the 10th grade, 11th grade, when I got into like 11th grade, that's when the attacks started. People started jumping in on fights. They started jumping in. You very rarely had somebody jumping in a fight when I was in elementary school back in the 70s. In the middle school in the 70s to the early 80s, you barely had anybody jumping into a fight. But come the mid 80s, 84, 85, that's when kids started, you started having little gangs pop up and things like that, and people would jump in these fights. And there would be a school fight, and you knew that the person, one of the people that was in the fight, had a bunch of friends there, had people that was in that fight, people that was going to be watching a fight was affiliates of that person, and they were, maybe part of their gang or whatever, and the fight be going on. And if that person starts losing, and sometimes even if they wasn't losing, other people from that gang would jump into the fight, and everybody would scatter. Everybody would get away from it. And a lot of times, and for the most part, not everybody in the school went to that fight. A lot of people didn't go to that fight because they knew it was going to be a mess. People do not gather around for chaos. They don't gather in groups to go see a group fight or whatever. Those things used to pop up in clubs when I was growing up. I used to be a DJ, and people used to attack other people in skating rinks. Everybody just clear out of there. Or you had people who wouldn't go to the skating rink, or you wouldn't go to these clubs because people was fighting. People are attracted to one-on-one fights. They can respect that and they can honor that. But when you have somebody being attacked all the time, when there's not going to be a definitive winner, people don't want to see that. Think if boxing was like every time you turned around, there was something happening in boxing, and it looked like somebody was going to win that fight. And then there was some kind of interference from the corner, the manager, the trainer, or somebody's parent or whatever. And I mean, boxing have had some interferences like that have stopped matches or changed some outcomes. But think if you had that in boxing all the time. Just think if you had that. I mean, there wouldn't be no honor. There wouldn't be no respect. It wouldn't be no boxing. Boxing was shut down for it. But, in wrestling, that's something that we have to put up with. And week in and week out now, that's what we're putting up with. Because, look, I'm going to go back to some of the factions and the people getting jumped back when I was growing up. I used to watch the Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling area and, Mid-Atlantic Territory. And, of course, there was people that was notorious cheaters, okay? You had, Blackjack Mulligan, Nature Boy Ric Flair. Those guys was notorious for cheating when I was growing up. Those was two of the most guys that was basically guilty of it. It was first Nature Boy Ric Flair. It was Blackjack Mulligan. It was the Super Destroyer. Who else? It was Boris Malenko, the Brute Bernard, Skull Murphy. A lot of those guys, man, they was notorious for cheating. And this when I was very young. This was before it was like first, second, third grade, and they was very notorious for cheating. But their cheating was, they would get in and they would cheat every now and then, maybe 3 out of 8 matches. Like say if Ric Flair had his feud with Paul Jones, number one Paul Jones. Ric Flair maybe had cheated like 3 times and the referee and people would just go flipping crazy. Okay. But like 5 out of the 8 of the times there was no cheating. Flair might have lost or Paul Jones may have lost. Usually when Paul Jones lost to Flair would do something dirty, but he would not have outside interference to come in and win the match. Now, like I say, he would do it every now and then. Blackjack Mulligan might do something to Paul Jones as he's going toward the ring or whatever to slow him down. So that happened back in the day, but not as frequently as we see it today. Let's see. Blackjack Mulligan, man, he didn't never need any help. But every now and then, Ernie Ladd would, pop his head in, and pretty much help Blackjack Mulligan cheat. Ric Flair will pop his head in and help Blackjack Mulligan cheat. Greg the Hammer Valentine, they will do it every time. But if out about 4 months, you might have seen Blackjack Mulligan get help 2 or 3 times back in the day. But that's how it was. And as far as people getting attacked, you hardly ever saw that. I mean, but when you saw it, everybody freaked out and everybody was talking about it on the street corner after Saturday morning after the show. We go out on the street corner. Everybody's talking about wrestling. You go to school that Monday morning. Everybody's talking about wrestling and about how these guys pretty much have attacked somebody and they cheated or whatever. And it will make everybody tune in the next week, or it make everybody go to the show Monday night. Every Monday night they will have wrestling at Greenville Memorial Auditorium. Every Tuesday night in Spartanburg Memorial Auditorium. People would go to those shows because they wanted to see their favorite get revenge on that person for cheating. But now, every time we turn around, I mean, it's like we never can get a winner. We can never honor anybody. We never get to see who's great in wrestling today when it boils down to it. Because they never give these guys a chance to be able to walk out with their hands raised and their heads held up, because there's always attacks after attacks after attacks. Solo Sikoa, that's all he does is attack. And it's one thing to have a faction, 4 horsemen. Let's go and talk about the 4 horsemen. The 4 horsemen, man, yes, they used to attack people and, they used to do dirty things for Ric Flair to win. But when it boiled down to it, anytime Ric Flair had a very important match or he was defending his title for the most part, when it was a final outcome, Ric Flair would go in there and he would win those matches without the outside interference. There was other wrestlers, Grace, who used to do that. Roddy Piper used to do that. He'd go and win without the outside interference. Greg the Hammer Valentine would do that. So many guys, Ernie the Cat Ladd would do that. You would see these guys cheating, but when it was a main match, a big time matchup, these guys could go in and they could win it without the outside interference, even though they might cheat to win. They might put their feet on the ropes. They might do something in that ring. They, maybe hiding some brass knucks or whatever, but they was able to walk out of that ring as the winner. And even though that they did something underhanded to win the match, you still saw them walk out of that out of that match and say, okay, they won, and we still accepted that, even though they cheated. All right, let me go up. Let me go up a little bit here. All right, Richard, I'll get you in just a moment here, buddy. All right, Richard says, Harry, English wrestling is different. They have a round system like boxing. Yes, I know. Back in the day, they didn't have that. Now it's totally different. They done changed everything up. Richard said, Harry, they don't fight like they used to. They shoot. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. These kids just sit around, stand around on the corners, and they have a gun. And if if one of them approach you or whatever, you ready to throw hands with them, hey, these guys gonna shoot. And back in the day, I mean, 15, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, they're friends. Back in the 90s, in the early 2000s, you knew they had their friends. Their friends will be all over the place, or their friends gonna come back and they're gonna retaliate against you, or like I said, or like Richard said, they're gonna shoot you straight up. They're not gonna fight you one-on-one. And me and my brother, we was talking about this earlier today. But yeah, these kids are not gonna fight you, man. These young people, these teenagers, these thugs or whatever, on the street corners, they're not gonna fight you one-on-one, because when it comes down to it, as far as any of these young guys, man, none of them faze me. I go anywhere. Me and Chris, when we used to be hanging out, going places, and Chris, he see the thugs would be walking out, and Chris be like, nah, man, let's get. We're about to go in the restaurant. Thugs come out, nah, man, I don't want to go in there. Hey, I'd be like, man, let's just go. As far as fighting one of these cats, if somebody want to start a fight or whatever, I'm not worried about that. I'm not worried about that at all. Even if I didn't have any training or whatever, as a street fighter, I was a street fighter. These kids can't take a punch no more. Back when me and Richard was growing up, it was hard as I don't know what to knock somebody out. You just didn't walk up to people and knock them out. I don't care if you snuck a punch on them. You wasn't gonna knock a guy out. You wasn't gonna knock a guy out that was basically the same size or the same age you were. I don't care how you could be big or whatever, but you had to be a bad joker. That's all it is to it. I don't care how hard you punch, and I used to punch. I punched hard. It still was hard to just knock an average person out. We was accustomed to being hit. If you was in the hood, or like I say, just even white boys. I mean, guys that didn't grow up in the hood, white boys, or let's see. What I'm trying to say, suburban black kids, or kids that grew up, that didn't grow up in the rough areas and things like that. You get in a fight with them, like I said, they was tough. It was tough. People was tough. You just didn't knock people out. But now, you hit these young people, they just boom, they gone. I see these street beefs and everything, and you have some of these young kids, they be in their 20s, man. They, young, 19, 20, 21, 20, and they fighting 60-year-old man, 65, 58, 50, 58, 65. I watched earlier today, 58, a 65-year-old, and I see a guy who's 72, and they was just knocking these young guys out, man, because even though they was fast and quick and they was bouncing around, but once they got caught, once they got cornered, guys landed a few punches, or sometimes one or two punches, and boom, the kids was out. Lights out, man. Lights out. And that's because they're not accustomed to being punched. They're just not. And that's the reason why we don't dominate in boxing no more. We do not. It's embarrassing. You have some of these boxers who go over to Europe, and they go certain places, and they from Cleveland, Ohio, they from Chicago, Illinois, they from New York, and they talking all tough and all that. I'm from here, so man, I can do this and I can do that. They talking all tough and bad, and they get over there and some European beat their butts, kick their butts, man, knock them out. Or it's a very close fight, or if the American fighter wins, it's because he was faster or quicker, and sometimes they win, off athleticism. But and then so now you have people saying, oh, if reason Americans won fights because a lot of Europeans wasn't fighting a lot of American fighters back in the day. That wasn't the case. The whole thing about it is those guys knew how to fight because they learned how to fight. They learned how to fight in the communities. They learned how to fight in the hoods back in the day. Hey, Joe Frazier was already a fighter, man. He already knew how to fight before he even got into boxing. Ali knew how to fight before he got into boxing. George Foreman, all these guys, because you had to learn, you had to know how to fight some kind of, fighting. You may not have been a trained fighter back in those neighborhoods, but you knew how to fight because that's just what we used to do. I mean, we even used to fight for fun, guys. I mean, if we was bored, sometimes, just go out there and just start a fight. Or somebody, hey, a bad man hit this, and, you going one-on-one. But wrestling, guys, and all of us, that grew up in those areas, those rough areas. I was growing up in West Greenville, Sterling area when I was growing up. And that's the two toughest areas in Greenville, hands down, back when I was growing up. And, I born and raised in those two sections. And man, that's what we went out and did. We went out and played. And then we talked about wrestling. Wrestling was the main thing. Boxing was second after that. But we talked about wrestling, and we loved our wrestlers, and we imitated that. One of the fun things that we did, we used to make cutout belts. There was artists back then, and you would find in any neighborhood back then, you would find kids that could really draw, that could really lay down special things on canvases or on paper. They would draw these belts, and you had guys who would design their own belts, and they would cut these belts out, and we would have these makeshift wrestling, makeshift wrestling territories, and you would have kids in the neighborhood. We had over in Sterling, Dunbar, over in Sterling. My grandma stayed in Dunbar, up above Sterling. That was another tough area of Greenville County. And in that area, you had the white kids, you had white kids and black kids. This was basically a mixed neighborhood, but it was a rough area, But you had poor whites and you had poor blacks in that neighborhood, and we would wrestle. We started a wrestling thing, but everybody was cool with each other. You had your mom and pop stores and everything, but all of it was just a big family. But we all wrestled. We wrestled for those titles. We had our own little organization. We had tag teams and things like that. But kids was tough, and that was a good thing because it stopped everybody from boxing and fighting and things like that. Kids used to just do that just to be doing that, but that stopped us from doing that, and we was out there wrestling, man. So it was pretty cool. But like I said, one-on-one wrestling, and we used to watch it on TV, and we used to love to see. Rather, it was only a couple of us that liked heels, but for the most part, everybody liked good guys. I like good guys, but I like the heel. I did love Ric Flair, and then, Black Jack Mulligan every now and then, and a couple heels that I did like. But for the most part, I like the fan favorites. But we all loved that, to see our guy come out in the final finale as the winner. Like I said, there's honor in that, and that is gone. It's a lost art in wrestling, man, and it's part of the lost art of wrestling. Richard Hood said you couldn't trust Flair. No, you couldn't. He would turn bad. He would be bad. He turned good, turn back bad, turn good, turn back bad. It was crazy. You couldn't trust Ole. No, sir. No, sir. Ole, I would have never trust Ole. I remember when he became a fan favorite where he was up in Georgia, teaming up with Thunderbolt Patterson, teaming up with Stan Hansen. And, him and Stan played bad guys too at one time, but they was good guys too. I never trusted this dude. Never trusted him, man. I don't give a darn. I'm like, you can't trust somebody like that. All right, Richard said, Harry, remember the angle when Ole double-crossed Dusty in the Omni in Atlanta? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, that was crazy. All right, Richard says, Harry, remember the angle? Okay, got that one. Oh, you did it twice. Okay. Richard says, Harry, if you look at the fight videos today, they are arm punching and not putting their body into it. Exactly. And that's what I was trying to, I went out to and trained a couple guys, at Warriors Gym and in one of the gyms up the road from me. I can't think of the name of that gym, but at Warriors Boxing, training some guys. And, I had to teach these guys not to punch, not to arm punch, not to be slinging their punches. They winging their punches, they're slinging their punches, and a lot of them, they choreograph their punches. But I'm like, you got to put your whole body into it. You got to know how to step into it. That's one thing, as far as me, the way I look at every single thing, I look at anybody I see in any kind of combat sport. It doesn't matter if it's wrestling, MMA, boxing, or whatever. I check out how your body reacts to the way your foot movement is, the way you're balancing yourself. I always check that out because if you don't have good balance, you pretty much setting yourself up. Because there's some fighters who have did real well who didn't have good balance, but most fighters have real good balance, and that balance is going to help you throw a solid punch and to be able to put your body into it. Because if you off balance, you're not going to be able to put your body into a punch. It doesn't matter what how you throw it or whatever. Some guys got punches, man, where they still be off balance and throw a solid punch. I mean, hard shots. Some guys just got that magic in their fist. Deontay Wilder, for one, this guy never have really been on balance, but he does put his body into it, but he has awful balance. And it is what it is, but he does have a lot of power in his fist. All right. But yeah, getting back to it, like I said, man, the square circle, the lost honor, the return to one-on-one wrestling. Now, wrestling, like I said, if it don't return to one-on-one wrestling, the respect that we got from that, wrestling will never get back to what it needs to be, because week in and week out, that's what we see. Last night, that's what we saw at the end of the show. It was just a bunch of chaos in the ring. No need for it. There's no need for it. It's crazy how you have people in the back. There's someone that's always in the back. And, even at these indie shows, and telling everybody to go out there. Hey, the crowd don't need to see everybody. They just don't. You don't need to see, don't need to see certain wrestlers over and over again. Remember back in the day, and Richard, I know you remember back in the day, it used to be special when sometimes every now and then this will happen. Somebody will be getting attacked or whatever, and you will have everybody, all the wrestlers, and I'm talking about all the good wrestlers, will come out and go into that ring. And that was special to see, because we would see these guys come out and do their thing. They would do a one-on-one or with their tag team partner, and that was it. But sometimes you get to see, like if you watching Georgia Championship Wrestling, you would get to see Tommy Rich come out there, Mr. Wrestling 2, Tony Atlas, let's see, Jerry Oates, maybe Tim Horner, Brad Armstrong, Bob Armstrong, all come and jump in the ring at the same time. They were and that was special because somebody was in there causing a whole bunch of chaos. Say like Ole Anderson and Stan Hansen was in there doing something, and they were just dogging out. Because remember, they used to have the good guys. It would be like, some jobber that was coming out there, some ham and egger coming out, trying to jump in the ring, trying to stop the beating or whatever. And these guys would just be beating them down, just throwing them out the ring and everything like that. And it'd be like two, sometimes it'd be Ole Anderson, Arn Anderson. I mean, Ole and Arn, it'd be Ole, Stan, and maybe they have somebody else in there with them. I remember Matt Bourne in there a couple times with him, or, let's see, it was, and then, it might have somebody else in there with them on the attack on one, on somebody like a Wrestling 2 or Tommy Rich. And then you will have, like I said, you have a group, probably 4 or 5 guys that's really come out, and everybody would just go crazy in the studio. But we used to have that every now and then, and that was so cool. That was so cool to see that, because you're like, man, all these stars coming out there. And because only time we really got to see all the stars in the ring together, or was like a lumberjack match where they would surround the ring, or if it was a battle royal, and a battle royal was something special it was a special event back then. You didn't have a lot of them. You saw them every now and then, and that's when you got to see all the stars in the ring together. But man, yeah, I just wanted to come on here and talk just a little while, like I said, guys, about wrestling one-on-one. It's something that we are missing. It's something that we need it back. And I just don't think wrestling is going to survive if it does not get back to that. No ands, ands, or buts about it. If it don't get back to that element of wrestling where a wrestler is going one-on-one, and when I'm talking about one-on-one, I'm talking about tag teams too, guys, because in tag team wrestling now, you see 2, 3, 4, 5 teams, they just jumping in and they're attacking each other. So sometimes you have 10 wrestlers and they started out as one tag team match, or it started out as a 6-man tag team match, or, a 3-way, a tag team, a 6-man tag team match, and it turns into 2 or 3 more teams in that ring at the same time. It's just chaos, and it's just something that you're going to continue to talk about, and there's no finish. It's never no finish to it. And finally, when it gets finished, all you do is get more chaos. You get more of the same thing. It's rinse and repeat over and over and over again, guys. Straight up. And that's not the type of wrestling that's gonna captivate anybody, and it's not going to catapult this thing to the next level. It really isn't. It really isn't. Yeah, Joe Frazier. Yes, he was definitely a street dude. Definitely. Ernie Shavers, Ken Norton. I mean, these guys, of course they wasn't in Joe Frazier's, wasn't in the same realm that he was in. But a lot of, like I say, these guys, man, they knew how to handle themselves out on the street. Rich said, Harry, I used to get angry when they would jump on Dusty. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Dusty was always getting jumped. Dusty probably in the 70s, mid 70s to late 70s, early into the mid 80s, probably got jumped more than anybody. For that 10-year period between 75 to 85, he probably got jumped in wrestling more than anybody. I mean, just very famous, very, just knew how to back up his talk. Made a lot of, there was a lot of people jealous of him. I'm not going to, and he had a lot of hate. I mean, from Terry Funk. Terry Funk could not stand him. Terry Funk probably hated him worse, more than anybody. I say Ernie Ladd can compete with that. If Terry Funk, Ernie Ladd, they couldn't stand it. Couldn't stand Dusty Rhodes. Egg-sucking dog, both of them. I mean, especially Terry Funk, but couldn't stand Dusty Rhodes. Let's see, who else? I mean, there was other ones. Sir Oliver Humperdinck had a bad taste in his mouth for Dusty. Ole hated Dusty, but Dusty got jumped all the time. Then Ric Flair and Ric Flair never really had a feud until early 70s when they both started going for that world championship that Harley Race had. Dusty looked like he was going to get it and win it and hold on to it for a long time. Dusty did win it and held it for 3 months, and then Ric Flair ended up taking it from him. Then Dusty ended up over there in Crockett Promotions, and then we had the fuse between Dusty and Ric Flair, and it just went back and forth. And Ric Flair, when he ended up getting the Horseman, Dusty just attacked all the time. But you know what? Back then, man, I could deal with the attacks. I did not like him getting attacked all the time. Dusty, I used to want to see Dusty win sometimes, even though Dusty was not my favorite. Ric Flair was my favorite. I used to want to see Dusty win. I wanted to see him go out. Dusty would fight so hard, man, to win that title and or to leave out victorious, even when he was like feuding with Tully Blanchard. He would fight so hard, and they would just ruin it, man. They would because they would all attack him. They would just beating him, and so I would feel bad for Dusty because Dusty deserved to leave as the winner. Jimmy Boogie Woogie Man Valiant, I used to feel very bad for him because he always was getting attacked by Gary Hart's army and then Paul Jones' army. He just sitting there, they just beating the living daylights out of him after he done pretty much went in there and just ransacked whoever it was against the Masked Superstar, against Shaska Watley, who used to be Pistol Pez Watley, or who else? The Great Kabuki. All these great wrestlers that they was trying to bring in to stop Jimmy, the Boogie Woogie Man Valiant. He would just decimate these guys, and they would attack him. And, a lot of that stuff, like I said, a lot of it was very good back then. If we had the level, it was at that same level like it was back then, it's pretty cool because these guys will get constant retribution the next week or 2 weeks, 3 weeks later. And if you didn't see it, get to go out to the arena to see it, they would show, they would have film. They'd be like, oh, we got a film or whatever. And they would show it. And these guys would get their revenge. And it was just great. It was great. And of course, they would get got again. They would get got again, man. But it went back and forth, but it was outstanding. But you always got to see these guys leave with honor, man, as a world champion, as a TV champion, as a United States champion, a Mid-Atlantic heavyweight champion, or a Georgia heavyweight champion, a national heavyweight champion. They would leave with their hands raised. They would leave with their heads held high through the crowd and dapping up the fans. And now, man, you know, anytime I see somebody go out there, I mean, sometimes we just sit there and predict on the show. We'll be predicting, oh, somebody's going to get jumped. Who's going to get jumped next? We know they're going to get jumped. It's ridiculous. It done got to the point where it's very ridiculous, guys. Hard to watch. All right, Richard said, Harry, the only way you can bring back wrestling like it used to be is to suspend disbelief. Yes, that's true. That's true. Rich said Harry Dusty would sell him getting jumped to the point that the fans wanted to get in the ring to save him. Yes. Man, that when he got jumped up there in the Omni in Atlanta by the Horsemen, man, Ole, Rick, Tully, and Arn, man, them jokers, whoo. And man, they didn't think they was going to get back to the dressing room. It just got that hot. It got that heated. Rich said, Harry, wrestling should be serious. Yes. And that's what it was back in the day. It was serious. It was so serious. Like, you know, hey, in my hometown of Greenville, South Carolina, Ole Anderson, the fan stabbed him 33 times. I was there. I was there when it was happening. I was 8 years old. I was 8 years old. Was it 75? I think it was 1975. I was 8 years old when it happened. He got stabbed 33 times. And I was in disbelief. My mouth was wide open. I was an 8-year-old kid, man. You know, and you know, he got stabbed and everybody was talking about it. And, you know, hey, lucky I was on the second level with my family, you know, with my grandma, my aunts and uncles. And, you know, this guy stabbed him. Everybody told him, he got stabbed, you know, and all that blood was just running. That was just flat out crazy. And it was a couple other really bad things happened at the auditorium that fans did to these wrestlers. And I'm just like, wow. They would just be jumping out of the crowd sometimes. And, you know, a lot of times they got beat up, but a lot of times they would get their shots in. They would get their ill intentions in on these wrestlers. It was bad. But wrestling was serious back then. It was serious. But yeah, you can look that up. That, you know, when it was either 75 or 77. I think it was 75. It was 77. I was 10. But I might be a little confused on the years. But yeah, Ole Anderson got stabbed, and I was there. We went every Monday night. I went every Monday night from third grade on up until I graduated high school. When I got in college, didn't get to go. That's when I broke the streak. But for 9 years straight, I went to every Monday night. I went to the Greenville Auditorium, and when we had special events, sometimes on Christmas, sometimes we had Thanksgiving. They had a Thanksgiving show, or sometimes they had other shows. We would go to them, and sometimes I would go to Greenwood, South Carolina, and watch their shows during the week, or Spartanburg, South Carolina, and watch the show. But yeah, I never forget when Ole got stabbed like that, and a lot of people like he deserved it. He deserved it, and yeah, he was a butthole. I think that was 77. I'm not sure, but yeah, he was a butthole. But I tell you what, he didn't deserve that. Straight up, that was crazy, man. All right, Harry, they used to have one comedy match. Now every match is a comedy match. Yes, sir. And sometimes I look at it, Richard, and just call it the comedy hour. It's kind of like rap music in the early 2000s. I would turn on MTV, MTV2, because they wasn't showing it on regular MTV, and watch rap videos and just laugh my tail off. I called it the comedy hour. It turned, rap music got to the point where it was comedy. And I'm just like, I'm cracking up on this stuff. Really am. But yeah, give me just a second. I want to look something up. I think that was actually 77 when Ole got stabbed in Greenville. I get those dates conflicted sometimes. Oh, no, it was in 76. Okay. It was in 76, and I knew it was in May because school was about to end. So I was 9 at that time when that happened. I was 9. I wasn't 8. Yeah, so I was in between those years right there. But I know the Anderson brothers from like 75 to 79, they terrorized the Carolinas, and they terrorized Georgia during that same time too. They terrorized it. And the Carolinas, Virginia, Georgia, they just terrorized people. But yeah, people saying, at that show, Ole, he deserved it. And me, even as a kid, and maybe because I was a church-going kid, my grandma had me in church all the time, I didn't think he deserved that. as bad as he was, I was just flabbergasted. My mouth was just wide open for the rest of the show. I think I just was stunned. I was stunned. Yeah, Richard. Yeah, Richard said I believe it was 75 or 76. Yeah, it was 76, buddy. I looked it up, but I didn't think it was 77. I didn't think I was 10. I thought it was 8. All right, Richard says that was some real heat. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And man, hey, I was not there. But I look at it a good bit. But it happened when I was a kid too. I was like 7. I remember reading about it in wrestling magazines and stuff like that when it happened. And then finally, I got to see video of it. Film of it or whatever. And then later on in life, got to see videos of it. And a lot of people, Jim Cornette been talking about it. Dutch Mantel, they talking about the riot in Cleveland, Ohio. I think it happened in Cleveland, Ohio, or was it Cincinnati, Ohio, where Ox Baker kept hitting Ernie Ladd with that heart punch. And man, they thought he had killed Ernie Ladd with the heart punch, because I remember Ox Baker, when he was in the Carolinas and he was in Georgia and stuff like that, he would just be talking about that heart punch, man. And he done killed a couple wrestlers. And yeah, those wrestlers had died in real life, man, who had hit with that heart punch, but they died of other complications, other things, which we find out a lot of years later that they died of other things. But Ox Baker was a very scary dude. And the guy who used to be me and Chris's commentary partner, Danny Paris, was real good friends with him. Ox Baker was living up in Columbia, South Carolina, not too far from here. And, Danny was real good friends with him. And, I was just like, Ox Baker was a menace, man. And he, I was just really thinking he was just killing people with that heart punch, or he could kill somebody. I know he had killed 2 men. And back then I just thought all wrestlers, these wrestlers was just tough, rugged. And it was going to be hard for him to kill anybody with that heart punch. But I remember the thing with Ernie Ladd. I'm like, this Joker knocked that big Joker down with that heart punch. And he just kept punching him, man. He just kept hitting him. And, just telling Ernie, just a little more heat. Ernie was like, hey, Ernie was trying to stop him or whatever, but he just wanted a little more heat, a little bit more heat. And those fans just got really crazy. They thought he was in there killing Ernie Ladd. And the fans just started doing all kind of things, man. They just rioted it. And they was just, just beating up police and just throwing chairs. They were just doing everything. And it was Jim Powers, I think Johnny Powers, who was a very good wrestler. It was Dutch Mantel, couldn't remember who was in the ring with him, but it was Johnny Powers, or what was his name? Jim Powers. I think it's Johnny Powers. But I used to like him a lot. And Johnny Powers was just sprinting out of that ring. He was going, and they just what is his name? Ox Baker, man. He was one guy had a chair, and he got Ox Baker right at the back of it. Hit Ox Baker right in the back at the top of his neck. And Ox Baker had that scar there for the rest of his career, for the rest of his life. He knocked the living crap out of him with that chair, man. It was crazy. But yeah, back then wrestling was taken serious, and yes, it should be still taken serious like it was back then. But when you have people like Triple H who wants to expose the business, they basically exposing the business with all this new stuff that they have, telling everybody how they do it, how they write the shows and everything. It's crazy. It is crazy. All right, Rich said Ole took that stabbing like the heat was. He took it. He took it for real, and and just basically brought it back into the ring, brought it back into his into his promos and everything. He came back and wrestled right away with all the stitches and everything. That was just crazy. Richard said, Harry, that caused the riot in Cleveland. Yes, sir. Yeah, big time riot in Cleveland. But that right there blew my mind even more than what had happened to Ole over here in Greenville at the Greenville Memorial Auditorium when he got stabbed. And like I said, I thought I was 8 years old. I was 9 years old at the time. And, mouth wide open, man. I'm just, for the whole rest of the show. And I remember the main event of that show. It was not Paul Jones. It was Ric Flair against Chief Wahoo McDaniel for the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Championship. And Ric Flair, man, he incensed a lot of people that because you already had the stabbing, and Ric Flair hit Chief Wahoo McDaniel upside the head with his 2x4, hit him with this big old 2x4, and the 2x4 had a nail in it, and blood just went all over the place from Wahoo McDaniel, and the fans just went crazy. They was already incensed. They was already ready to ride after, they was already, I ain't gonna say ready to ride because people hated Ole Anderson. I'll take that back. But people was already on the edge of their seats. And when that happened to Wahoo McDaniel, people just went nuts, man. They ready to charge the ring and everything. And Jim Crockett Promotions had like 20 something, there was cops there, undercover cops, and he had like 12, 13 security guards around the ring, and he had undercover cops, and they stopped. They pretty much was able to hold back everybody, but it was like a mob scene there, man. I would like to say my mouth was wide open, but that was a night to remember. I would never forget that. Yeah, Raymond, that was 1974. I was 7 years old, and I got a wrestling book somewhere, but hey, that wrestling book is long gone. My life, I had trunks of wrestling books and football, baseball, basketball cards, and my wife, the first house that we lived in together, she left everything up in the attic. I had forgot it was up in the attic, man, because I had all that stuff. I had a whole bunch of junk that I had brought in, all this old stuff. And remember those old little football stadiums, the old little, you buy the electronic football games. I had I had my mom, when I was a teenager, when I was, like in the 6th grade, order every team. That's when the NFL had 28 teams. Order every team. So she ended up ordering me every team. So man, they look good. And like I said, it's one thing I saved. My wife wondering why, I was trying to save those things. But she put all that stuff up there too. I wish I still had it because it'd be very expensive. But I had every single team, man. And but I used to love my little gadgets, and I was a DJ, and put a lot of records up there. So, but man, I couldn't get away from my wrestling books. I kept every wrestling book, and from my aunts and my uncles and all of them gave me wrestling books from the 60s. I had wrestling books with Spiro's what was his name? I can't, Buddy Rogers and all those guys was the champs, and Lou Thesz and all those guys. I had wrestling books all the way back to the 70s. I mean, from the 60s. So I would get them every week when I became a kid. Anytime wrestling books came, I would go to my aunts, uncles, or my mom, or whoever had money at that time, and to get money. My grandma would give me money to get wrestling books because I kept collecting them. They was like, oh, we got a whole bunch of old ones too. Now they gave me a whole bunch of comic books too. I had 2 trunks of those. I hated comic books, but I had a whole bunch of old comic books, and they ended up getting lost too. Put it that way. But I had a whole bunch of old comic books. I couldn't stand them. I would look at the wrestling books, man, the wrestling magazines, and I had some wrestling magazines, Boxing Review, Wrestling Review. They was the same thing. It was a comedy sports review. I think wrestling used to do Boxing Review and Wrestling Review, right? Right with each other. Rich said, I didn't know Ox Baker could move like that. He was right behind Johnny Powers. Yeah. He was moving it, man. He was moving it. That was a big dude running. But you could. It tells you the passion that the fans had back then. These fans will not have that type of passion now. The fans had so much passion, and if you hurt their heroes, man, oh my gosh, now they want to kill you. I mean, fans, or they want to get rid of. They want to bury. They want to bury you, or they want to cancel you. Straight up. All right, Rich said, Harry, remember the heat the Freebirds got for blinding the dog in Louisiana? Oh yeah. Wow, man. Wow, that was crazy. I did not think Junkyard Dog was ever gonna get his sight back. I was just like, he was still fighting. But I'm like, man, dude, you blind. You might as well just. Wow, man. That was crazy. Let's see. Ray said an ox killed Alberto Torres in 1970. Wow. But yeah, I know he had killed Ray. I forgot Ray's last name. But yes, there's a couple wrestlers. That's 2 or 3. Yeah, I know it's 2 of them that was confirmed after his match, had died. But from what they're saying now, they had died from, they said years ago, they died from other things. There was other complications that led to that. But man, hey, I believe that I had no reason not to believe him. Had no reason not to believe that this guy could kill somebody with that heart punch, man. And Stan Stasiak used to scare me with his too. He really did, Yeah, Ray Gunkel. Yeah, Ray Gunkel. That was him. God almighty, man. That dang on Ox Baker. That Ox Baker was something. But yeah, guys, we got to get back to that one-on-one wrestling, or like say, just tag team wrestling. Yeah, attack them. Attack them. Rock and Roll Express used to get attacked all the time. Attack them. Jump these guys, man. Have 4 horsemen attack tag teams. Do it. Have that same effect, but do it in moderation, guys. Everything in moderation. You get more with a little. And I don't think they understand that. I just don't think they understand that. And, going back to, like I said, when we used to be fighting growing up, we get in a fight, especially the schoolyard. We get in a fight in the schoolyard. We get in a fight in our neighborhoods, or get in the fights in the schoolyards. And, I hate to say it. I hate to say it this way, but it's the truth. But most of the fights back in the day, the people that came around saw the fights was usually the kids that was considered cool, the cool crowd, the in crowd. It's kind of like the pop culture, the kids that everybody aspired to be, or everybody used to talk to. And I mean, they may be kids from separate groups. Like you had your preppy kids, you had your, you had your preppy kids, you had your rich kids, you had your cool kids, you had your athletes or whatever. They were all, but everybody would gather in. The people that everybody knew, they would gather in and watch these fights. And I hate to say this, I hate saying it, but you had the people that was considered kind of like nerdy, or like band type guys, or people like that. That was like outcasts. They wasn't around. I never saw them around doing the fights. They would avoid certain things like that. So I mean, in wrestling, I mean, you have guys say this all the time. Guys that me and Chris know, other guys who report wrestling, guys who do podcasts, guys that's on the radio. We have a couple guys, Brett Warburton, who's a real good friend of ours. He's on WYFF News. He does news station. We have all these guys, and when we all get together, they say we just a bunch of wrestling nerds. And today, a lot of people out here that watch wrestling, not all of us, not talking about us, Richard, Ray, Raymond, or anything like that, not all of us, but the majority of wrestling fans today are, which is nothing wrong with them, because those were my friends too, the nerds, the outcasts, the guys that was different, people that was different, mostly wrestling fans today. Wrestling always had those fans, always have, but those fans, wrestling back in the day had wrestling fans from all walks of life, and the guys that's running most of these, running these indie territories and things like that, they are outcasts. They are, people that was not sitting at the cool table in schools. They sat at their own tables or whatever, but they did not get to sit in with the kids that was the in crowd. Never. And you go into these shows, and that's one thing about me and Chris. When me and Chris first started doing this podcast and doing commentary, everybody would stare at us when we came into the shows. They would just going into these indie shows, and I was wondering why that was going on. I started looking around, and I'm like, wow, I felt out of place. I said, Chris, I love everybody, and and being around people, I'm a people's person. I talk to anybody, but I felt out of place. And wrestling wasn't like that back in the day. Back in the day, wrestling fans came from all walks of life. But now, man, I hate to say that, man. I see a lot of Steve Urkels of it, and people like that. Not just Steve Urkels. They could, be from other little sources where you like, hey, man, this person, not creepy, but he's a little nerdy or whatever. But they're wrestling fans, and that's cool. That's cool. But one thing that I used to see, and I'm gonna tell you this, and this is one thing that I saw change. This is a change that I saw as far as in fighting, one-on-one fighting. 10th grade, I say all the way up from 4K. When nursery, we called it in a nursery. When I was 4 years old, we all went to the nursery. we all went to the nursery. It was a school, kind of like 4K today, but you went to nursery school, even though you might have been going to nursery, because my mom had us in the nursery. We was going with a bunch of kids, but once you turned 4 years old, we went to school. We went to school and started learning, but it was called nursery. They didn't call it 4K. Then we went to 5K. But from 4K all the way up to I was in like 10th grade. Anytime there was a fight in school, it was one-on-one. Very rarely, I probably seen 1 or 2 times where somebody jumped in and everybody got pissed off and pulled that person who jumped in out of that and say, this is one-on-one, this is one-on-one. But I got in 11th grade, man. All right, 84. 84, 85. Kids started getting jumped. Everybody started, you had kids, little gangs start popping up everywhere. And, I'm going to go ahead and admit it. I was in a gang in middle school. Even way before that, we didn't jump people. We would go down, we fight Kennedy Park, the Plainfield Bearheads. That was my street. That was my community, Plainfield. We go down there and we fight the Kennedy Park boys, Lake Manor boys, Latin Manor boys. We go fight different groups. But one thing, we played football. We played football against them. And then if they lost and we had the best players, they lose, it was a fight. We all got together. We played sports against these other communities. They lose, it was a fight. But we all fought in the group, and you would have the older kids that was out there, because we was the junior Bearheads that I was in at first. My brother, he was the head of the, he started the Plainfield Bearheads. He was the leader. And they was in 11th, 12th grade. Those guys will make sure that it was an even fight. We played football. If it was 8 of us, it was 8 on 8. It was 4 on 4. It was 6 on 6. It was going to be a one-on-one fight. It was a one-on-one fight. And that's how it was. That's how it went down. But when I got up in 10th, 11th grade, then, 11th grade, I started seeing guys that, these 9th graders, these guys that just came out of middle school, they had their friends come in and jump in these fights all the time. Anytime a fight would happen, they would jump, people would jump in. You see kids just coming from everywhere. I was, DJing at the skating rink, DJing in the clubs. A fight broke out, one-on-one for a little while, boom, somebody come in, somebody else come in, somebody, start attacking. And just what used to happen all the time. Kids that never used to be around these fights, kids that, I looked at as band kids, or kids that used to like Star Wars, used to like Star Trek, used to look at those type of shows and everything. And I'm going to tell you like this, because everybody was my friends. I was a DJ. So I sold mixtapes, and man, I used to go to everybody because, these kids, people listen to different music. What I used to buy, most of the music I used to buy when I was a DJ was hip hop. I had got into hip hop real big. I bought a lot of R&B. I bought some pop stuff like Wham. I loved Wham. I loved Hall & Oates. I loved, I love New Shoes. I Can't Wait. That's the type of pop stuff that I bought. I didn't buy that really heavy metal stuff, even though I listened to it, like Twisted Sister, Quiet Ride, and things like that. So I went to my friends who lived in my neighborhood, because at that time I was living in, I was living in the suburbs at that time. As I got older, we moved into the suburbs. I had a lot of white kids that was my friends, and I would go to their houses and things, and it didn't matter if you was a nerd or whatever. You was cool with me, and hey, those kids were cool with me. I used to protect them in school. If anybody picked on them, nobody used to mess with them because of me. And, some of my friends, but they were like, why in the world are you friends with them? I say, man, these guys down with me, they down with y'all. So everybody used to want to hang out with me because I was a DJ. So I had a lot of friends that brought a lot of people around me that didn't used to be around me, because these kids would want to go, the kids that was assumed as the outcast kids would come to the parties. They would come to the school dances and things, and they would sit over by themselves, and they would come over to the DJ booth. I would have them come over to the DJ booth, and they would sit over there by me, and I would ask people to go out and dance with them and things like that. And I would be playing music, and they loved the way I was DJing. They just loved that. So, and they all thought I was cool. So these kids, they was in my neighborhood and things like that, and they rolled on the bus with me when I did ride the bus. But all these kids love me to death. So I would go over to their houses, eat with eat with the families and things like that. And these kids will have, like I said, they will have the Quiet Rides, they will have the Twisted Sisters, they will have, Sticks, they will have Motley Crue, they will have all the stuff that I needed to go in, because I was this DJ that became very popular, and on the weekends I would be making. I make on Friday nights, I make $200. On Saturday nights, I make $100 or a little bit more. And then, like I said, I was making mixtapes for everybody. But I was going to all these clubs, doing all these clubs back in the day. And I borrowed music from my friends that was, like I said, they was a lot of these, they might have been, they might have not been in the cool crowd, but they listened to cool music. And, we all sat around and we looked at MTV together and things like that. But that was cool. So, when I got back into wrestling, we started going back to these shows. These are the type of kids that I saw. These are the type of families. These are the type of people that I saw in the shows. And it's overwhelming. Like I said, back in the day, you always had a group of that as fans, but most of the fans in these shows, these indie shows, and then when we start going to see WWE, you see probably like 70% of them is that 70%, 80%. And then you have the regulars, and then you will see AEW, about the whole fan base. Not Ring of Honor, Ring of Honor and TNA, about the whole fan base. And I'm just sitting there looking at it. And one of the biggest things that I noticed is you don't see the beautiful women that you used to see at these wrestling shows. Every show used to have a lot of beautiful women that used to go to the shows, and that told me a lot right there. Because I would see certain TNA shows, I would watch certain TNA shows, didn't see a woman in the crowd, maybe a couple women in the crowd. But that was a big difference right there. All right. Let's see. My man Richard Hood said Thunderbolt Patterson was brought into the All Soft Wrestling Alliance to take on Ox Baker after Ray Gunkel's death. Whoa. Richard said, Harry, also people back in the day didn't have access to guns like they do today. Yes, sir. The weapons of choice was the switchblade or brass knuckles back then. Yes. I always used to worry about, some kid cutting me or whatever when I used to be getting in those fights, especially the gang fights. Somebody cutting me or have brass knucks. But, I used to make sure they wasn't able to get to those brass knucks. You got to be quicker than them. You got to outthink them. But, sometimes I was fighting 2 and 3 people at the same time, jumping all over my back and everything. But you had to be tough, straight up. You just had to be tough. But, hey, got into boxing, 8th grade, then had a girlfriend, and, only got in a couple fights up in high school. But, middle school, 7th, 8th grade, I was 13, 14 years old, man. 15, up to 15, I was getting fights like crazy. But then, like say, when I was already boxing, but, you think these guys will stop not fighting me. I already could fight. I was already a good fighter. And then I became a boxer, and I'm just like, oh, my gosh, I was a trained fighter. And then you still had people to fight and wanted to fight you. That's just people was macho back then. And they just wanted to fight. But, man, yes, it's one-on-one. I love the one-on-one aspect of fight. I had somebody who tried to jump in on one of my fights. I'm winning the fight, and I had to pull that person back. I say, no. So what are you trying to do? Just because you're my friend, and that's what they was used to doing. I'm like, no, don't do that. I want to see fights, one-on-one fights. In wrestling, yes, I want to see attacks. But, man, how are we going to get back to that? It has to be – you have to have Triple H or Tony Khan. I can't put my faith in Tony Khan. But they're going to have to right the ship. They are going to have to – it will take 7-8 months of them changing the whole game around to where it looked exactly like it did back in the late 70s to mid 80s to the late 80s, early 90s, to where you got storylines and you got people hardly ever getting jumped. They will have to do that for about 8 months straight before they have people actually forget this old era of having people just attacking all the time. It can be done in wrestling. In wrestling, it can be done. But until they can get back to that one-on-one, they can get back to the honor, back to honoring one-on-one wrestling in the square circle, guys, we're going to suffer as wrestling fans. We're going to continue to see the same thing week in and week out, just chaotic. And I've been talking about this chaos stuff for the last 2 years on this show. Last 2 years. First 2 years I put up with it, man. 2001, we started in 2021. No, not 2001, 2021, 2022, and 2023. I put up with it. Then I just got to the point where I just started complaining because we just saw it week in and week out. Things that didn't make sense. No logic behind the things that they're doing. And my partner, Christopher Burton, trying to make sense out of it. And our old partner, Michael King, who used to be on here with us too. Both of them trying to make sense of this is why this is happening. I'm like, this is not good. This is not good. And you see the results of it. Any real wrestling fan, like I'm saying, you, Richard, Raymond, people like that, is going to look at this, and I'm sure was looking at it 3-4 years ago and saying this type of stuff is not going to work. And we stick around because we love wrestling and we want wrestling to succeed. But not one wrestling fan that's walking around today, that's walking this earth today, not one wrestling fan that watches WWE, that watches AEW, that watches TNA, that watches, what else we got? Watches NWA, that watches MLW, that goes to the indie shows. There's not one wrestling fan that can sit there and tell me that they don't want the general public to like wrestling, that they don't want everybody to love what they're watching, to love this. Because every wrestling fan in these arenas, every wrestling fan that be at a show and this stuff is on TV is doing everything they can to convince the general public. Even though the general public is out there, every now and then you're gonna have people watching it that don't usually watch it. Is out there and they saying, "Holy snit!" I ain't gonna say that word, but they out there saying that, and this is awesome. This is awesome. Why you think they're saying that? Because they want people to love what they want, what they're consuming. Not that they want to be in the in crowd, but they want people to like what they love. Wrestling fans want to be accepted. They want other people to accept what they like, and like say, this is cool, this is awesome, this is great. What we're doing, they just do. And you have some wrestling fans that's just delusional, man. Delusional. One guy, he was over on Peaches and Power Bombs. I forgot this guy's name. This black guy. He's over on Peaches and Power Bombs, and I just can't believe one of the things that he said over there. He said, "Man, Ric Flair don't." I mean, not Ric Flair. He said Michael Jordan don't have nothing on Ric Flair. And and Peaches and Power Bombs, my girls, they went ahead and said, "Yeah," but he said, "Hey, these kids at the end of the day, they're gonna remember Ric Flair more than they remember Michael Jordan." And then you had the ladies, agreeing with him, saying, "Yeah, more kids gonna remember Michael Jordan. I mean, Ric Flair more than Michael Jordan. He's gonna go down in history as a bigger name than Michael Jordan." That's delusional, man. That is delusion of grandeur. Big time delusional. There's no flipping way. I don't care. You can add in Hulk Hogan, even rest in peace to my man Hulk Hogan. The Hulk Hogan is the only thing that's going to come close. Well, I mean, Flair basically got to the point where he's a bigger name, or just as big as Hogan. Even though Hogan was bigger, during their heyday and while he was wrestling, because Hogan had that machine behind him up in New York, and so he was a bigger name. But Ric Flair, the things that Ric Flair just became legendary, and his name blew up like crazy. A lot of people know him. But yeah, that was the dumbest statement I ever heard from a black guy, man. I mean, it didn't matter what color he was, but I was just shocked that he would say something like that. Just dumb. That was just stupid. That was real stupid. I'm like, man, Michael Jordan sold his shoes. Jordan's shoes sold more, sell more, makes more money than the World Wrestling Entertainment for Nike. I'm just like, wow, can't believe you said that. Can't believe you said that. That shoe company generates. I mean, just the Air Jordan brand, it generates more money than the World Wrestling Entertainment every year. So I mean, that was just flat out crazy to say that. I'm like, Jordan was he was the most famous person on, most famous person, not most famous, just most famous athlete, just by his head. They did a thing back in, I think, Time magazine or whatever, and did a worldwide survey of the most famous people. Did the same thing with Muhammad Ali back in the 70s. Muhammad Ali with other famous people, and Muhammad Ali was the most famous. But Michael Jordan, from just his head alone, he was picked, and he was the most famous person on earth at that time that was walking around. Just huge. You just can't say things like that. That was just dumb. I'm like, please stop being delusional. Can wrestlers be that big? Yes, they can. But, the game has been elevated. It's been elevated. I will say that. But the sad part is they keep making more and more money, and it was basically because of inflation and making it bigger, making it a bigger spectacle on TV, but not really generating, that kind of fan support besides clicks online. That could be some wrestling fans going on there clicking it over and over again. Man. Exactly. Richard said, Harry, those guys were like rock stars back in the day. Yes. And me and Chris was talking about that. I said, Chris, look, wrestlers back in the day, you could be you just wrestle in the territories. That was territorial guys. That was household names throughout the country. Guys that just wrestled in the territories. Never went to World Wrestling Federation. Never wrestled for Jim Crockett Promotions, the biggest two. Never, probably wrestled in AWA. But you had guys that just wrestled in the territories that was household names. Roddy Piper, before he stepped foot in New York, Roddy Piper was already a household name. When he was wrestling in Portland, Oregon, then he came to the Mid-Atlantic area. And then he came and went to Georgia. He was already known all over the world. Dusty Rhodes was basically a territorial guy. Up in Florida, up in Georgia, coming down to the Carolinas. He was just in territories. He was the most famous outside of Andre the Giant. He was the most famous person in the world back in 77, the most famous wrestler in the world back in 75, 76, 77, outside of Andre the Giant. He was the most famous wrestler in the world. And then 77, 78, Nature Boy Ric Flair, wasn't the world champion yet. It was Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan, Nature Boy Ric Flair. They was the most famous. Those were the three most famous wrestlers in the world. Then Harley Race, then Harley Race and Jack Briscoe and then Terry Funk came in. But Tony Atlas and that's the reason why I rank him as the number one black wrestler ever, is because between 77 to 83, you couldn't mention wrestling without mentioning Tony Atlas. Tony Atlas was one of the top 4 or 5 wrestlers in the world as far as recognition for like 6 years straight. No other black wrestler has ever did that. No other black wrestler has ever did that. And I know my partner said, Ron Simmons, and, he said Tony Atlas never won the World Heavyweight Championship. We know it was all politics back then, Richard. And whoever else listening, we knew it was all politics back then at that time. But Tony Atlas was just, man, he was the man, straight up, for like 6 years straight. Like I said, one of the top 4, top 5 wrestlers in the world. And if he would have kept his head on straight, he would have won a world championship easily. He would have did that. He probably would have been the first black guy that won it. Him and Rocky Johnson did get the WWE, the WWF tag team championships. But yeah, Vince McMahon Jr. wanted to take him. I mean, not Vince McMahon Jr., but Vince McMahon Sr. He loved Tony Atlas, and that's the reason why Tony Atlas used to beat the crap out of Hulk Hogan back in the day. Well, Hulk was a bad guy though. But Vince McMahon Sr. didn't care for Hulk Hogan. But even Jr. came in and said, Tony Atlas could have had the world handed to him, but Tony started messing with drugs and everything, became unreliable. But Tony was the man, man. He was for 6 years straight. He was the man. He was. He was. But yeah, we got to get that one-on-one thing. I want to see one-on-one wrestling, guys. That's what I want to see. That's what I crave. That's what I'm looking forward to. And if wrestling can get that back right, that right there would be a major step. They can get that back right, and then we can, and then you can hit off with storylines, and you can hit off with character building, man. And wrestling will be all right. It will be okay. Richard said, Harry, nobody in Georgia knew who Roddy Piper was when he showed up on GCW in '81 as co-host. No, not at that time. Not at that time. That's when he really took off. I mean, everybody knew him in the Carolinas, Portland, Oregon, Los Angeles, in California. He had got popular. And went around to Portland, Oregon, and then he went down to Mid-Atlantic, and then he went up to Georgia Championship Wrestling. And that's when, from Georgia Championship Wrestling, but he was on WTBS, the Superstation. But he was already known by a lot of people in the country when he arrived up there. But yeah, as far as people up there in Georgia Championship Wrestling, yeah, Georgia at that time wasn't going to know him because it's just, everybody did not have everybody, cable was not nationwide at that time, or it became nationwide, but a lot of people still didn't have it. But yeah, I remember when he showed up as co-host there, everybody, because we already had it. Because remember, I'm down here in Mid-Atlantic watching Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. We already had Georgia Championship Wrestling. I had been watching Georgia Championship Wrestling since '77 when we got telecable, and I've been watching it on cable for 4 years. When he showed up in '81, when Roddy Piper showed up, he showed up here in '79, and in '81 he went up there and he was going back and forth there for a while. But yeah, I was already watching Georgia Championship Wrestling from '77 on up to '81. I'll never forget when I first saw Tommy Rich, and he was there with Tony Atlas, and Tony Atlas was talking about him. He was talking about how great this man was, and he was talking about this young man, how calling him Wildfire, and this guy's exciting in the ring, and wait till you get to see him. He's a bolt of lightning, and Tommy just sitting there. Tommy just blonde-headed kid, just skinny kid. And I'm looking at him. I'm like, I don't know. But I remember he started going in the ring, and then he ended up getting in that feud with Abdullah the Butcher. Abdullah the Butcher would beat him up every week, and then he ended up beating Abdullah, I think, or whatever, or end up having a draw with him. I think he beat him, and then he took off from there. And he was teaming with Tony Atlas, and he was calling him TNT. Yeah, Richard, you just said that. But yeah, that was just crazy, man. That was some good stuff. TVs didn't cross back then. Exactly. Yeah, because up in Georgia, I was wondering, was y'all getting Mid-Atlantic? Because I know Mid-Atlantic would go out to Buffalo, New York. They was getting Mid-Atlantic out there. Philadelphia was getting Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. I used to go out there to my cousins out there. And they was my aunt, my mom's sister, Lynn, lived in Philadelphia. And we used to go there every summer. My brother, he went there and lived there for a whole year, and he got to see Mid-Atlantic that whole year. But Mid-Atlantic used to get there by satellite, and Mid-Atlantic could go to Buffalo, New York, too. But, yeah, they were called TNT. Yep, sure was. They was exciting, man. They were exciting, straight up. But, I was wondering, I think some parts of Georgia, I know up in Augusta, I think it was not Augusta, but maybe Augusta, but I know some parts of Georgia, they could get Mid-Atlantic. But for the most part, a lot of time, I don't think y'all got it. And I don't think Georgia Championship, I don't think they wanted it in the area, to tell you the truth, because they didn't want it to overshadow Georgia Championship Wrestling. Georgia Championship Wrestling was great. I don't think they had as many stars as Jim Crockett, but it was really good. I mean, very good wrestling. I'm like, wow. But the areas were so close. Like I say, Atlanta was just 2 hours away from me. The areas were so close. I'm like, why in the world isn't these people up here in Georgia getting Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling? Just crazy. Probably, I think some people say they got it on UHF back then from certain parts of Georgia, but you had to be in places like Toccoa, Royston, and places like that was closer to the upstate to get it. And I think they are the ones who got it. I know they the ones that got it because I talked to a lot of people as we go down to Eastern Alley and all that. They used to watch Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling and Georgia Championship Wrestling, so they got it. But sorry that you didn't get it, Richard. We would get a match from Mid-Atlantic when they were bringing a guy into GCW from their area. Okay, cool. But yeah, it was the people from Royston and Toccoa and places like that was getting it because they was close to WYFF TV that was coming out of Greenville. That was our signal would get to them in Spartanburg. But Wow, guys. All right, been a pretty good podcast. I see a lot more people came in or watching. But yeah, this is Saturday. This is a Saturday evening, and hey, I know a lot of people out here doing things, and hopefully a lot of people will come on and they'll watch this podcast a little bit later on. Richard said GCW gave Savannah to Crockett. Okay, okay, all right. Lucas said send link or else a no will pop out. I think you're going to say later, no. Lucas, I'm about to get off. Unfortunately, I'm about to get off. Man, this right here has been a pretty good podcast. But guys, man, look, we need that one-on-one wrestling. We need that one-on-one wrestling. And just like I got all the pictures back behind me, one-on-one wrestling. We got Hulk Hogan. I'm not sure exactly who's. Is that Marcus Buff Bagwell that he got in the headlock, or Scott Norton or somebody? And then we got that other one, the other picture, and we got a Japanese wrestling. We got, I think that's Willow Nightingale kicking that other female. And then you got Kenny Omega right there. Not sure. I think he's wrestling. I forgot the guy's name. The little short guy, man. What is his name? What's his name? I can't think of his name. And then up at the top there, we have Raquel Rodriguez about to punch. Is that who's the Japanese wrestler? I can't think of a name right now. All right. Oh, that's The Rock. Yeah, it is The Rock. Yes, it is. Wow. Thank you for saying that, Richard. Thank you for saying that. But hey, man, I don't know. We need that one-on-one wrestling, guys. We need that one-on-one wrestling. If wrestling is going to get back to where it needs to be, I mean, they have got to fix the small things, man. They have got to fix the small things first before anything else. And Chris Dundog send me a message. What the heck? I gotta call Chris here in just a moment, guys. I definitely got to call Chris. All right, man. But I appreciate everybody coming in, rocking with me, rocking with the Straight Up Wrestling Show. And I will talk to you guys a little bit later. Appreciate everybody coming in. Before you leave, if you're over on Facebook, hit that like, share, join. If you're on YouTube, you hit the like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, ding, 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 so you know we're on like times like these. And if you over on Twitch, you do the same thing that you do here on YouTube. And if you on X, formerly known as Twitter, hit that like, share, tweet, and retweet, and follow the Straight Up Wrestling Show. I am out of here, guys. Talk to you later. Stay straight up. Peace.